drugs, like metformin that cost 5p, and so they do not need to be expensive. So a lot of the questions I know Aubrey's fielded over the years is, this only going to be for the 1%, the wealthy. If it's 5p and you can sell it for 50p or $1, just get a slightly smaller cup of Starbucks, and buy something that will allow you to live a little longer. So it's not going to be price. There is going to be biologics that play a role as well. Biologics have to be created and grown. They are going to be more expensive. But I think that the small molecules are going to play a big role. The other fascinating thing as we got involved in this with Jim Declan and I was the element that our patient population is 8 billion people. That if you can make something for 5p, you don't have to charge a lot of money. And if it's incredibly safe, I don't need to go through complicated trials. I just have to prove that it's incredibly safe. So these therapeutics will be everything from stem cells, where we're very passionate about what Mike's doing, to small molecules, which will be inexpensive. One last point that will hopefully segue into what Mike's going to talk about is there's a thing called a senolytic, and it naturally it is used to destroy zombie cells that have outlived their usefulness that a number of people on this panel have worked on, and they cause osteoarthritis. What percentage of those are in your knee is it when you have osteoarthritis? 10%? Is it 30%? And if it's 30%, and we destroy that, you're not walking out of the doctor's office. But if you add stem cells to that and regenerate the tissue, not with 70-year-old cells, but one-day-old cells, now you have a comprehensive solution. So this is going to be an incredible opportunity to create an ecosystem and use these opportunities and technologies. I went over a minute.
This is the crossover between what you're doing, Greg, and what you're doing, Mike. Because in terms of the gene therapy, how do you actually go about changing my genome? What happens?
Well, we're actually more in the cell therapy space, but so there's, in our lifetime, we've seen several revolutions in biotech. There was, before we were born, there were drugs. Antibiotics came on in World War II. But then came the world of biologics. So the Genentechs and Amgens of the world, that was the recombinant DNA technologies to make proteins on an industrial scale. Something was very, very challenging to do before recombinant DNA. But then now we're in this realm of biologics where we've got, with these pluripotent cells, this is the field I've been working in for the last, 20 years now, is we've isolated pluripotent stem cells that don't age, unlike you and I, and all the cells we make from them are born young. And we can make them on an industrial scale, and we can make any of the cells of the human body using this. It's an entirely new platform. So, the idea is to put young heart muscle cells into an old patient's heart and give them back the muscle strength in their heart that they had when they were born.
Where are you?
You mentioned gene therapy. And then there's introducing cells into the body, which in the history of medicine, we've never been able to do this for an aging population before. But gene therapy kind of was out of favor, in favor, out of favor, is really now in favor again. And that's the idea of going in and actually doing sort of surgery on your DNA. Adding genes or replacing genes or changing the functions of genes in the cells in our body. So with this tool chest, as Aubrey talks about, when you have a broken car, a mechanic takes multiple tools under the car to fix it. It's not just a screwdriver that fixes everything. With this toolbox of new, powerful technologies, cell therapy, gene therapy, as you mentioned, and other biologics, we believe we're going to be able to surprise everybody. I think, can I just say this?
Yeah.
From an investment standpoint, I'm not in the world of finance. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a scientist and a business guy. But forgive me for giving advice to investors because I'm not an expert investor. But in my mind, when you have a demographic shift, it's powerful, it's a tsunami of aging. It's the biggest demographic trend of our time, right? For sure. And the spending power of the aged population. They have the majority of the financial assets. And if you have a technological surprise, you mentioned that the investment public isn't expecting this. I think there's the investment opportunity of a lifetime. But forgive me for pontificating on investment.
Just let me ask you, how far away are we from this kind of practical gene technology where you can go in and you can modify someone's genome?
I'm monopolizing the time, so what do you guys want?
Yeah, so let me talk about some technology that we're developing right now, which I think may end up answering that question. So at the moment, of course, we are 20 or 30 years into the aspiration of being able to modify the genome of somebody who's already alive, somatic gene therapy as it's called, and we are really not very far along. It's been 20 years since there was a bad accident with one teenager dying in a clinical trial that set gene therapy back a long way. It hasn't really recovered from that very much, and the reason it hasn't recovered is largely because technology hasn't been there to make it recover. But that's changing now. Everyone's heard of CRISPR, this new way of modifying small amounts of DNA in cells. CRISPR started out being unacceptably unsafe. In fact, one of the people who were pioneering it, a guy named George Church, that we all know very well, calls it genomic vandalism. But people have developed second and third generation versions of that, which are getting very, very safe indeed. Now, there are limitations to what they can do, but they can potentially be combined with other approaches to allow much more versatility. One thing that we're doing right now is combining new versions of CRISPR with a technology from bacteria that allows the insertion of large amounts of DNA, many genes at a time, for example. And this is the kind of thing we're going to need. In the next, I would say, 5 years, we may be at the point of being able to do clinical trials of gene therapy modalities that are vastly more powerful than anything that we've seen today. And that, of course, has an application as a platform technology to be used for many, many different types of therapy.
Aubrey, CRISPR, just so we're totally clear about this, this is well beyond the conceptual stage. It's actually in practice right now. It is available medical technology.
Public company, is it?
It is a public company. So this is a proven medical technology.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, proven, of course, at certain levels. So, in general, CRISPR can be used on cells outside of the body that you may then inject into the body as cells. That's a lot easier to make safe than injecting some kind of vector into the body that will modify cells that are already there. But for many applications, especially in aging, you don't have the choice of doing the former because the cells that you want to modify are long-lived, non-dividing cells that can't just be killed and replaced. So it's very important to get this working.
Look, Aubrey, I know you've done a lot of work and a lot of thinking about where this is going to take us and how long it's going to take in order to increase human longevity appreciably. But I know this is an impossible question, but I hope you don't mind my asking it. So here we are, 2019, getting on to 2020. Come 2030, 2040, by how much longer will human longevity have been extended?
So one can't actually answer that question because, not only because we have uncertainty about how soon certain technological developments are going to come, but also because when they do come, they're not going to have some kind of smooth, linear impact on longevity. What's going to happen is that we're going to go from this very, very slow increase in longevity that we've seen over the past century or more, of maybe 1 or 2 years per decade in life expectancy, to something where we just can't measure it anymore, because the rate at which we are improving the therapies will be faster than time is passing. Essentially, it all comes down to the fact that these therapies are going to be regenerative. They're going to be ones that don't just slow down aging, they actually take the clock back and take people who are already in middle age or older and turn them back into young adults. So, of course, thereby buying time to improve the therapy so that we can re-rejuvenate the same people later on.
So are there people alive in this audience who will be rejuvenated in this way?
I think there's a very high probability of that. I try and give predictions based on probabilities, and my prediction right now for how soon we have a 50-50 chance of getting to this decisive level of comprehensiveness of these rejuvenation therapies is only 18 years
18 years.
from now.
And presumably with this regenerative technology, we will be able to live fulfilled lives without any of the degenerative diseases of old age. I mean, what about Alzheimer's? If we live to 120, do we still not have a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's?
The idea is that we won't. The idea is that all of the various types of molecular and cellular damage that accumulate in the brain that come together to form dementia of whatever sort, especially Alzheimer's, all of those things will be repaired so that the structure and composition of the brain at the molecular level, the cellular level, will remain pretty much how it is in a young adult. And that, of course, you know, the human body is a machine, so it's simply, its function is determined by its structure.
Mike?
You brought up a very good point, and I think it's worth addressing. The goal of virtually the entire gerontological community, that means, you know, the people that are studying the biology of aging, medical researchers, the goal is to increase health span, not necessarily lifespan is the goal. Why do I say that? I mean, we'd all like to live longer. Because there's the common misperception, I think, that the goal of aging researchers is to extend human lifespan, allowing us to live more and more decrepit and disabled. And who wants a life like that? Who would like to live another 20, 30 years with all kinds of tubes and devices and artificial technologies? Well, the good news, I guess, is that I don't know of anybody in the field of aging research who has that as the goal. The goal is to extend health span, the number of years we're free of disabling diseases, you know, like macular degeneration that robs you of your central vision. It's really disabling. Or, of course, heart failure, you know, and all these age-related chronic degenerative diseases, where the goal is to push those off to allow people to be productive, happy, free of disease as long as possible.
Greg, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, it's very interesting that the top 10 leading causes of death, they're all age-related. Dementia, diabetes, respiratory disease, cancer. Your chance of getting any one of those pathologies at 30 and at 50, or at 70, it's 50 times higher, 20 to 50 times higher for each one of those pathologies. Something has happened in those 40 years that has predisposed you to Alzheimer's, to degenerative tissue. So if people like the scientists beside me are able to find the products that will slow or halt aging, all of those diseases are pushed out. So the economic cost of that as well to governments, to social medicine, is pushed out. So on the concern of Alzheimer's disease or degenerative tissues, you know, all of those are affected by the ability. And as Aubrey just pointed out, should we be able to begin to address the cellular pathways so well that we reverse aging, and that you have the anatomy and physiology of 25-year-olds, it ceases to be an issue. The time frame, much like Jim was commenting, it's impossible to figure out when the next recession is. It's impossible to tell you definitively when that'll happen. But it won't be a gradual upslope. It'll be a sudden jump, as Aubrey again alluded to. And Mike mentioned as well with recombinant DNA. So, and when it happens, it's happening very suddenly. And you need to be aware. And I think it's possible in the next few years, again, to make it relevant to investors and to your own lifespans.
I just want to ask Paulina at this point, where does AI come into this?
So it's exactly in the right place, because first we can develop drugs using AI, and we can do this faster comparing to the current standard process. At the same time, what we can also do, we can develop biomarkers, and it's really important. We're all talking about the health span, but how we can measure health span, for how we can predict the progression of diseases, or even predict whether the person is going to develop disease or not. This is really important. This is where AI coming, and right now revolution in AI happening in many areas, including healthcare. In 2017, FDA firstly approved for the first time the AI-based system to diagnostic of the heart disorders, which is a huge step for FDA. They're a really conservative regulatory agency. They did it as a fast-track approval, meaning they recognize the potential. Most of the pharmaceutical companies that are top pharmaceutical companies right now, they either have a project inside focused on AI, or partner with a company that focused on AI. and they do both drug discovery and biomarker development. So there is a lot of potential right now. What is also interesting, the field is moving so fast, it's even hard to predict what is going to happen probably in 2 years. Because most of the advances that have been achieved in robotics, for example, or autonomous car driving, they are translatable or really easy translatable into healthcare, which is fascinating because we have right now all those wearable devices tracking us all the time. It's a lot of information. This is like really big data. You've been streaming information about your health status, about your heart status, like every second. You have to have a really sophisticated tools to analyze it. Otherwise, it's impossible. You're not able to do this with your human brain. If you're even a genius, you're like a genius doctor, I don't know, with a lot of degrees, it's impossible to do this. You only have to have AI tools that will track this.
I'm looking forward to that, where I can download all my health metrics to my smartphone. Time is running short, but I just want to ask Greg, keeping it very, very simple here. So this drug is going to be commercialized, within 2 years?
As I said, there's a number of them that can almost go the route of medical foods because they're so safe. At our corporation, we're hoping to launch our first product by this time next year, which causes your heart to function better. In mice, it also protected their brains and allowed them to live longer. It's a much more difficult study.
Joe, this time next year, let's suppose the drug comes to market. When I take this drug, what happens to me? Are there visible results within a short space of time?
Interestingly, and going back to what Paulina said about biomarkers and diagnostics, for people to continue to use a product, they're going to want to know that it actually is doing something. This one in particular, you'll be able to test your urine, and you'll be able to know that it is in fact working. And then the interesting thing, it increases something called left ventricular ejection fraction, which basically means your heart is functioning better. So there will be significant results for anyone over the age of 50 who's concerned about their heart.
And when should we expect Juvenescence to list or to come to market?
Markets willing, and depending on that recession that people have been talking about today. I think that we're in a very interesting opportunity that this is such a huge thematic. And so to be able to raise 200, 300 million, 500 million is going to be very important to accelerate this through the next few years. So markets willing, hopefully next year.
And Paulina, in silico is also thinking about a listing.
Yeah, we're planning to be listed in 2-3 years.
2 to 3 years. And where is that likely to be?
Hong Kong, so we moved our headquarters to Hong Kong because we also want to expand in China. Initially, we're a US company.
So you see the real growth potential is in China?
Yes, because of the data, because of the mindset of people there. They're really thinking about this digital health. They are really open to AI, so there's a lot of potential there in China.
And the sheer size of the population?
Yes, also that.
Okay.
But also the burden of the aging population, so they recognize the potential even on the governmental level because they have this huge burden of the aging population.
Right, that's a very important point. And Mike, impossible question to answer in 15 seconds. Where is Agex going next? What's the big next event to look out for at Agex?
Well, we're already public, so I'm going to be careful what I say, but in terms of forward-looking statements, I'll just expand a bit about something I mentioned earlier. And Paulina mentioned that the pace of scientific discovery right now is breathtaking. In part, it's due to information technology. In part, it's due to high-throughput sequencing of nucleotides like DNA and RNA. So what's going to happen in the next 3 years is you'll be reading about, not only from our company, but from other companies, really significant advancements in understanding and potentially intervening in aging. Agex wants to be on the top of that wave. We picked our ticker on purpose, AGE. We want to be the #1 biotech company in the field of aging biotechnology. And so where we plan to be is showing that we have the leading intellectual property and product development stream that would most powerfully intervene in the biology of aging for the benefit of for all of us.
Okay, so hopefully we'll meet you again next year.
Or-
Well, gentlemen, Paulina, thank you so much for that. I'm so sorry time is short. We spent a day in November which went by very rapidly, as I recall. Half an hour is really nothing. But thank you so much for your insights and for your presentation of the current situation. Thank you. Thank you, Aubrey. Well, ladies and gentlemen,